Hello internet users and welcome back to another video. Once again, it's time to become the world's most irresponsible Pokemon trainer. We're going to be coming up with another way to put a game's save file into a seemingly unplayable state, all by using its own mechanics in unexpected ways. For this particular softlock, we're finally going to be taking a look at a remake, specifically Fire Red and Leaf Green. I'm sure that you don't need me to tell you this, but the original Kanto games are incredibly broken. As a result of that, I've ended up showcasing a lot of different softlocks that you can do in those games. When it comes to the remakes though, many of these situations just aren't possible to replicate. So as you might expect, a popular request that I get is to try and find a softlock that will work in the remakes. So for this video, we're going to do just that. As well, I also want to take the opportunity to expand on some of the ideas shown in some of the previous videos. For example, in the Shedinja video, we looked at a situation that could be crafted early in the game, by sending a particular Pokemon to a file as soon as trading became available. For today, I wanted to do something similar, halting progress as early as possible. But instead of setting up with a trade, I want to only use Pokemon that can be found in the game that you are playing. Now with all of these things taken into account, I believe I've come up with something. Here's how to set it up. Number 1, play the game up to the end of Mount Moon. After starting a new game on Fire Red or Leaf Green, you just need to play until you're near the end of the game's first cave. The point you have to stop at is this Rocket Grunt here. I've said this before, but this character is the first mandatory battle that has to be done in this area. Every trainer before him can technically be avoided. Because he absolutely has to be battled in order to move forward, it's important that he's left undefeated as a part of the setup. Number 2, catch a Geodude. For the next step, we're going to need the Pokemon that we'll be trapping ourselves with. Geodude and its evolutions are pretty special, and they're going to be the only thing that makes this setup work. Mount Moon is the first place that you can find Geodude, so that's why everything has to be done here. Anyways, with the easy parts out of the way, let's move on to the difficult part. Number 3, carefully raise Geodude to a level 100 Graveler. Yes, you did just hear me correctly. Restricted to the beginning parts of your Pokemon adventure, you're going to train this thing to the max level. And when I say to raise it carefully, what I mean is that you need to pay attention to what moves you replace as it levels up. At level 53, Graveler will learn the final move it needs for this to work, Explosion. Once this is done, its 4 moves should be Iron Defense, Mud Sport, Self-Destruct, and Explosion. Since the move deleter is located much later in the game, learning and replacing Graveler's moves like this is the only thing that makes this doable. Now, we've once done something similar with an Electrode before, but trust me, this time we're going to be making things much more difficult. With the Electrode video, many people have insisted that if you make a self-destructing Pokemon level 100, then it will completely cut off every escape option. So that's why the Graveler needs to be raised to the max level. Since Graveler can't properly battle with its current moves, once it's level 53, it'll have to be leveled up by constantly switching it out. This will obviously take quite a bit of time. In fact, I'd say that you could beat the entire game several times in the time it would take you to do this. But hey, it's technically possible to do, and the internet insists that this will guarantee that there is no escape. So I guess this is what I have to do. As for why we're using Graveler instead of Golem, the entire point of this setup is to show that it can be done without connecting to another game. So I don't think it would feel right to trade it back and forth in order to evolve it, even though I think Golem looks much better than Graveler. With all of that stuff explained, let's move on to the next part. Number 4, pick up every item and defeat every trainer. In order to ensure that we'll have no resources later on, we need to deal with everything in the game that appears before the Rocket Grunt. So simply defeat all of the trainers and pick up everything you can find on the overworld, including all of the hidden items. Number 5, throw away all of your items and money. Now that we've cut off all the ways we can obtain more stuff, we just need to get rid of everything that's now in our possession. Simple enough. And now for the final step. Number 6, release all of your other Pokemon. With everything else taken care of, we now just need to get rid of everything except the Graveler. At this point, all I have is the starter that got super leveled from all the switching out that was done to train it. And with that gone, we finished setting up the lock. Let's take a look at our situation and see just how dire it is. Our only Pokemon is Graveler, who only has 2 status moves and 2 self-destructing moves. If we attempt to battle that Rocket Grunt now, we can't win the battle. Iron Defense and Mud Sport don't do anything to help us and can only be used to stall. Eventually, the player will have no choice but to use Self-Destruct or Explosion. Because this will knock out Graveler, the battle will end as a loss, taking the player back to the last Pokemon Center. Despite being level 100, this Graveler cannot do anything but lose now. Although, if this were any other Pokemon from this part of the game, the situation would be completely different. Let's say, for example, you tried to do this setup with something like a Pikachu from Viridian Forest. Raising it to level 100 without any outside trading, you could have its 4 moves be Light Screen, Agility, Growl, and Tail Whip. All of these are status moves that can't be used on their own to defeat any opposing Pokemon. However, this would not softlock the game. You can still waste all of Pikachu's PP against wild Pokemon, and then gain access to Struggle, which you could then use to damage whatever trainer is blocking your path. In the case of Graveler, though, it is no longer possible for it to use Struggle. Because it's your only party member, the instant you use Self-Destruct or Explosion, all of your moves' PP will be restored at the Pokemon Center. And at this point in the game, there are no wild Pokemon that know anything that can cause the moves to fail, while also spending their PP. For instance, it doesn't matter if you get hit with a bunch of Pidgey's Sand Attack. Even if Self-Destruct misses, you're still sacrificing your entire health bar to use the move. But it's not like it would matter much anyway, since there is literally nothing to gain from defeating wild Pokemon. Graveler cannot gain any more experience, and money is only obtained through trainer battles. And because the Versus Seeker isn't obtained until Vermilion City, that single Rocket Grunt remains the only person that you can now possibly battle. You can't buy any more Pokeballs or even the Magikarp from the salesman. The only way to get any money to do so is defeat the one trainer that's in the way. And as for connecting to another game, that won't work either. As I've said many times before about Gen 3, you need to have at least 2 Pokemon to be able to trade with another game, so outside help has been cut off. And if you were also thinking about a way to replace any of Graveler's moves, you're out of luck there too. By now you've already sold all of your TMs, and currently the player wouldn't have access to any HMs or move tutors to use either. Another quote-unquote solution you might be wondering about is with Clefairy. Whenever I do any setups in Kanto, a common thing that people ask is why I don't just try to go encounter wild Clefairy, and then have them use Metronome. The idea is that through Metronome, they'd have a chance of using something like Payday, which would give the player money. Well, Clefairy doesn't learn Metronome until level 29, and you most certainly are not going to encounter a Clefairy of that level in Mount Moon. In fact, between Fire Red and Leaf Green and all of the original Kanto games, there is only one version where you can find a wild Clefairy that is a high enough level to know Metronome, and that is the Japanese Blue version. For some reason, that game lets you find Clefairy inside of Cerulean Cave. Anyway, the point here is that in this softlock, I can't use any of the same tricks I've used in the past to escape. So as you can see, right now this is another Pokemon journey that has seemingly come to an end. No glitches or trading required. By simply training an early game Pokemon a certain way, you're locked out of progressing. The save file is now left in an unplayable state, and you're forced to start a new game. But is there actually still a way to escape? As stated earlier, it is absolutely impossible to replace Self-Destruct or Explosion. Therefore, it's also impossible for Graveler to struggle. Looking at this from another angle, what if there was a way to make the opponent run out of PP and struggle itself until it faints? But at first glance, that doesn't seem like it would work. With the PP of Iron Defense and Mud Sport, Graveler can only stall the opponent for 55 turns. The Rocket Grunt has a Rattata and a Zubat, both at level 13. At that level, Rattata would know Tackle, Tail Whip, Quick Attack, and Hyper Fang. Combined, those moves have a total of 110 PP, double what Graveler has. His Zubat knows Leech Life, Astonish, and Supersonic, which have a total of 50 PP. Also keep in mind that if they were to run out of PP, Graveler would still have to stall turns until they knock themselves out. So the question now is it possible to extend Graveler's 55 turns? The answer to that is yes, and we can do it with the help of another wild Pokemon. The Paras at Mount Moon are able to know Stun Spore at their available level. To do things optimally, we need to waste a single turn in order to be hit with the move. So going back into the Rocket battle, this time we only have 54 turns to stall. But because of Paralysis, we now have a chance to significantly extend that. Paralysis in Pokemon works like this. Every turn you have a 1 in 4 chance of being unable to move. When this happens, the turn will go by without you spending any PP for the move you selected. So my proposed escape method is this. It should theoretically be possible for Paralysis to activate enough times throughout the battle so that those 54 usable turns are delayed enough for both Rattata and Zubat to struggle themselves to 0 HP. However, in order to understand how likely this is to happen, we're going to need a bit more information. Together, the Grunts Pokemon have a total of 160 PP, but since we can't see how much HP they have, it's difficult to know exactly how long it would take for them to succumb to Struggle's recoil. It's never exactly been clear if regular NPC trainers have preset IVs and natures, or if they're randomized like a wild Pokemon's would be when encountered. I've also seen too many conflicting answers to this online, so I came up with a solution to reasonably illustrate what their HP could be. On a separate game, I captured an entire box of Rattata and an entire box of Zubats. All were raised to level 13 without any effort values gained for the HP stat. For the Zubat group, their HP ranged from 33 to 37, and for the Rattata group, it was 30 to 34. So these values are around what we can expect the Rocket Grunts Pokemon to have. Because we're using a level 100 Graveler, and with how the game calculates struggle recoil, they'd be receiving 1 point of damage when they use it. With the best luck, you'll have to survive 63 turns of struggling, and with the worst luck, it'll be 71. Now, anyone familiar with Pokemon's battle mechanics would know that this battle is going to have a lot of extra RNG influencing the result. I'll be getting to that stuff in a bit, but for the sake of making this easier to understand, and showing just how ridiculous your luck needs to be to escape, let's first simplify the problem in the form of dice rolls. So if we assume that we have the worst luck with the opponent's HP stats, combined with Rattata and Zubat's total PP, we have a battle that will go on for 231 turns. With Graveler's remaining PP, 54 of those turns are guaranteed, which means we need there to be 177 turns where paralysis activates. Since paralysis has a 1 in 4 chance of happening, we'll represent it as a 4-sided die, and say that rolling a 1 counts as being paralyzed for the turn. To simulate this battle, we'll roll the die 231 times, so in order for it to be a successful escape attempt, we need a 1 to be rolled 76.6% of the time. Also keep in mind that rolling a 2, 3, or 4 represents Graveler using up one of its 54 free turns, so even if you did get those 177 ones in 231 rolls, you'd have to take the order of the rolls into account to know if Graveler was already forced to self-destruct at some point during the battle. However, the order of the rolls is actually pretty meaningless, since rolling enough ones is near impossible by itself. So obviously, rolling a die 231 times takes a while, so I'm using an online tool to show some quick results for you all. With every click, you could say that I'm simulating an escape attempt. As you can see though, the results for each number aren't too far apart from each other. Of course, that's to be expected, since each number has the exact same chance of being rolled. But as you can see from the several attempts happening in front of you, it is extremely unlikely that you're ever going to roll what you need. In fact, I decided to do 500 attempts of this dice roll situation, and from those 500 attempts, the highest result that I ever got for a single number was 78. Not even half of what we need. And don't forget, this dice roll stuff is a very simplified way of looking at the battle. There are other things to consider, such as Zubat being able to confuse you. You might think that hurting yourself in confusion is something that would buy you a few extra turns, but it is not a good thing here. It will deal quite a bit of damage to you over time, especially since the game checks the chance of confusion before paralysis. And you might think that being a level 100 rock makes you invincible here, but no. Even if Rattata and Zubat are doing the minimum amount of damage possible every turn, that really adds up over time. Also consider that they even have the chance for critical hits. Even if you somehow had perfect luck and could guarantee the 177 turns of being paralyzed, you have a very real chance of getting knocked out the majority of the time. And there you have it, everybody. Another miserable softlock with an even more miserable solution. This is similar to situations like the Lorelei softlock, where you can technically say there's an escape, but the method is so impossible to pull off that you're better off just starting a new game. At least in the case of this one, it happens so early that starting over is barely a problem at all. And by the way, if you're wondering about how this setup would be different on the original Gen 1 games, it's completely impossible. I mean, let's be real, it pretty much is in Fire Red and Leaf Green as well, but in the case of Gen 1, enemy Pokemon don't use any PP with their moves, so it's impossible to make the enemy struggle. As for Let's Go, in those games the TMs can be used infinitely, and you can't get rid of your partner Pokemon either. You simply just can't use the same setup in those games. And that about covers the Graveler softlock. I think this is a really interesting one since it can be done so early, and without connecting to another game. It's weird to think about whether this could be considered a flaw in the game's design, though. On one hand, it's so specific with its setup that it absolutely would never happen unless it's done intentionally. But on the other hand, this doesn't require any fancy glitches or ridiculous exploits. All I did was level up a Pokemon and teach it the moves it wanted to learn. It just so happens that a certain combination of those moves at this stage in the game can completely ruin everything. While there is no way that this situation is ever going to be a problem in anyone's playthrough, at the very least, I've proven that even the remakes aren't safe from horrifying softlocks. My name is Picasbury, and thanks for watching.